today, I think, Monday the 22nd, just before 2, published what has to be, for me, just the most sort of The Guardian opinion piece that I think I've ever come across. And just a kind of fascinating insight into a particular liberal worldview, in the sense of a kind of appeal to intentions and fair play. So, as is kind of being discussed in the chat, the Guardian's always had like a bit of a tension within it between being a left-wing newspaper and being a slightly more centrist Lib Demi. Someone just described it, which will only make sense to you if you're from the UK probably, but kind of paper of a slightly more upstanding centrist liberal vibe. During the last Labour government, it probably was a little bit more left-wing. During the Corbyn years in the UK, it very much tacked to the centre. Simon Jenkins is a columnist for The Guardian. I could not really tell you what he does outside of that. He has today written what I think is a fascinating article. The headline of which is, "No matter how bad the Rwanda Bill is, a bunch of unelected peers shouldn't decide its fate." But let's read this one, because it fascinates me. So so we've explained who Simon Jenkins is. The second thing we maybe need to explain is the Rwanda Bill. And kind of in short order, the Rwanda Bill is a bill that has been introduced by the UK government, which aims to respond to an increase in the number of people coming across the English Channel to seek asylum by sending them to Rwanda. It is, some of you will have seen my video about Bibi Stockholm, which was this idea that, and this existing practice in which asylum seekers were being housed on a barge for a huge amount of money, but primarily as a kind of electoral stunt, I guess, of being like, look everyone, we're really horrible to asylum seekers and therefore you should vote for us because you like having a government that's horrible to asylum seekers. The other aspect of that has been the Rwanda Bill, which involves people who arrive in the UK to seek asylum here being sent to Rwanda and forced to seek asylum there instead. This law was passed. It was then overturned by the UK Supreme Court. So in international law, if someone comes to your country and applies for asylum, they have the right to do that, and you have to properly process their application. One of the big no-nos is sending them to the country where they have escaped from, where they're saying they need protection from. The UK Supreme Court said that if the UK sent asylum seekers to Rwanda, it couldn't be certain that Rwanda wouldn't either persecute these people for the same reason that they were saying that they'd been persecuted in their home country, or end up sending them back to the country that they said that they were fleeing from. So the Supreme Court said, well, you can't do this, right? Because Rwanda is not safe. The UK government's response to this was to pass a law that sort of said, whatever any courts say in the UK, the government believes that Rwanda is safe. It essentially passed a law that overrode the ruling of the court. As in most kind of democracies, the UK has various different institutions which are meant to... This is such a bad drawing of anything. What even is this? Which are meant to kind of check one another's power. In the US, you have the presidency, you have the House of Congress, and you have the Supreme Court. In the UK, you have the government and parliament, which are kind of the same one, but I guess we can maybe separate them. And you have the Supreme Court, the UK Supreme Court. And sort of the idea is that each of those institutions can challenge the other one, and it means you're in a scenario where if you have bad judges, then they might be challenged by good politicians. If you have bad politicians, they might be challenged by good judges, right? And this was seen by many as like an affront to the system, that the government would just pass a law which went, oh, the courts have said that we're doing a thing that's illegal, we're therefore going to change the law so that they sort of can't say that it's illegal. All sorts of messiness here, but at the moment, the one thing stopping asylum seekers who come to the UK from being sent to Rwanda instead, which is going to be really expensive as well as being really cruel, is the fact that the House of Lords, which is the UK's upper house, which is not elected, it is appointed, which is a point of contention. And so at the moment, the only reason that the UK is not deporting asylum seekers who have come to the UK to seek asylum to Rwanda is that the House of Lords keeps voting against it. So today, Simon Jenkins has written this article in The Guardian. No matter how bad the Rwanda Bill is, a bunch of unelected peers shouldn't decide its fate. It says, democracy needs checks and balances, but the undemocratic composition of the Lords deprives it of basic legitimacy. Probably worth saying that one other thing about the House of Lords is that people kind of know it's undemocratic and a bit archaic. The idea of the House of Lords obstructing laws that the House of Commons is trying to set is like something that people do generally think is a bit off. In fact, there is a kind of convention in the UK House of Parliament in which if Parliament tries to pass a law that was within the manifesto of the party that is currently in government, then the House of Lords will not obstruct it. Simon Jenkins has written this. Almost everyone agrees that the government's Rwanda Bill is a bad idea. Its effect on deterring immigration will be trivial. This is the idea that if you have this really cruel and unusual punishment for asylum seekers, that less asylum seekers will be likely to come to the UK. Evidence on that is kind of shaky. From my reading around the topic, the evidence that is that most asylum seekers that arrive in the UK don't have a huge amount of knowledge of what the system is here because, I don't know, they're far away and they don't know that. They tend to come here because they have generally good vibes about the UK. They might have some family here. They speak English. They have like a cultural connection, often through colonialism. Like it tends to be that kind of thing. The right-wing press like to kind of share this idea that asylum seekers come to the UK because like they know specific loopholes about its legal system and its benefit system and such, but the evidence suggests that is not the case. Anyway, this is just the weirdest of articles, right? So the headline suggests that the argument is that the House of Lords should allow this horrible Rwanda Bill, which is aimed at cruelly and kind of performatively punishing asylum seekers so that the Conservative Party can get some extra votes. The headline suggests that the argument is that the House of Lords should let that happen because, like, oh, that's against fair play, that's against procedure for them to not let that happen, therefore we must, because that's it's the principle of the thing, right? The argument itself is like not quite that, I don't think. The argument is kind of just that the House of Lords is bad, which I totally 100% agree with. I'm not entirely sure why the Guardian have pitched it as though the argument is going to be that the House of Lords like should be letting the, because I don't think there's anyone, like, I don't know, it feels like it's kind of a weird attempt to win people who really hate asylum seekers and like all of their politics is based around exacting the greatest amount of punishment and cruelty on asylum seekers, like an attempt to try and win them over to the cause of abolishing the House of Lords. The problem there being that if that's people's reasoning for wanting to abolish the House of Lords, I would hate to think what they would want to replace it with. If the argument is that the House of Lords should let this horrible bill pass because that's not the way you do things and it's the principle of the thing, etc., etc., there is kind of this horrible view into the emptiness of a certain liberal view of the world, which kind of fails to account for the fact that the political right will always play dirty, right? As we've seen with this Rwanda Bill stuff, right? The courts said that this bill couldn't be enacted because Rwanda is not safe. The Tories then ripped up the rulebook and played dirty by going, oh, well, we're going to pass a law that says the court can't do that. Ha ha ha. A similar thing happened with Brexit all of the time. There was this, for kind of like Remain liberals, there was this constant belief that like, well, the government, well, you know, people have voted for Brexit, but the government doesn't have to do that. It was only an advisory vote. And then the government were like, yeah, we're going to do Brexit, obviously. And then there was a certain liberal view as like, oh, well, Parliament can stop it from happening because actually Parliament's sovereign, not the government. And then Parliament kind of voted for it to happen. And then at one point, there was a certain kind of liberal argument that the Queen might stop Brexit from happening, or the courts might stop Brexit from happening. Wait, at what point you're just so far down the rabbit hole of having this belief that like the institutions of the state will, it's okay, they'll step in because if something's unfair, it will get ironed out. It's a very optimistic view of the world. It's just not one that's borne out by any kind of reality. And therefore, as much as I hate the House of Lords and think it should be abolished, I think it's okay if it stops bad laws from happening. When bad things happen to bad people, it's okay even if even if it's not technically fair, right? There's this sort of liberal belief in the institutions, this idea that kind of like the institutions that Western liberal democracies have created are brilliant and perfect and will always sort things out. And the Rwanda Bill perfectly shows that this does not happen. In fact, I ended up scanning through the rest of this chap's articles, and so many of them are just, we shouldn't do the thing. So, for example, he wrote a piece against Scotland's new hate crime law. So Scotland introduced a new hate crime law, and he was like, well, no, we can't do that, again, because the principle of the thing, and I don't agree with the thing you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it or whatever. Which, again, is a lovely view of the world to have, but it has this naivety of the thing where you go, there are plenty of people on the political right who, if it was possible to ban The Guardian, totally would do that. They totally would do that. I also enjoyed the fact, some of you will remember there was a story from a few weeks ago where there's a private members club, and like a very expensive private members club in London called the Garrick Club. And it came under some controversy for the fact that it has a rule whereby women can't become members. And he wrote a whole article about how bad and wrong this was, despite the fact he's a member. Like, why are you a member of this club? Like, if you, like, you're happy to write a piece in The Guardian about how much you disagree with the fact that, that this like esteemed private members club is men's only, but you don't disagree with it enough to not be an actual member of that club, which I will say, like, that means that you at least have to view that as secondary, right? Like, I don't think this makes me some sort of like exceptional person. Like, I don't think that this makes me some sort of like hero, that I would find that weird. But anyway, yes, the Rwanda Bill is bad. Yes, the House of Lords is bad. Even if the bad thing stops the bad thing from happening, that's okay. I think it's okay to celebrate when a bad institution works in a way that is good.